the warehouse there is a culture of fear. Of people are scared.
I visit my family who are overseas. I'd like to go away for 3 or 4 weeks. Is that reasonable?
Yes.
On a basis of that, you just say, I don't even have to give you a reason, you're out.
Yeah, that's not how it is. So you'd apply for leave.
I've got it in writing that it is.
Mr. Swing, are you aware of the phrase new meat?
No.
I'm telling you, they want to turn it into some media circus and showboat for Unite.
In 2016, the sports chain, sports director Mike Ashley made headlines for the wrong reasons. They were embroiled in a working malpractice scandal, you could say. Well, on the 7th of June 2016, where members of Unite, right up to the owner himself, were invited to an oral evidence meeting in the Business, Innovation and Skills Committee on Working Practices at Sports Direct that will leave you astonished. Well, we'll start with the chair, Iain Wright. No, not the former Arsenal player. Calm down, everyone. No, it was Labour MP for Hartlepool at the time, and he asked both at the time, Steve Turner, Assistant General Secretary for Unite the Union, and Luke Primarello, great name, Regional Officer for Unite the Union. What were their roles in terms of negotiations for members of Sports Direct in Shirebrook? Also, did they have any roles in terms in retail outlets?
Yeah, we have statutory recognition at Sports Direct for direct employees only employed in the warehouse itself. This was secured in 2008 when there was around 500 direct employees. Since that time, that number's dwindled to just under 200 direct employees, supplemented now by over 3,000 agency workers. We have no recognition with the agencies themselves, and there's been no collective bargaining taking place since 2008, despite the fact that we secured statutory recognition.
Anything to add?
We have members within retail, but we have no statutory recognition within retail, and we've had no agreements with the company over pay for at least 3 or 4 years.
Mr. Turner, I was going to ask in terms of access, in terms of management. I don't want to put words into your mouth, but you'd say there's very little access in terms of being able to have a good, positive relationship?
There is no relationship really with Sports Direct, other than recent discussions that we've had around the non-payment of national minimum wage with the company and HMRC. There's only access in terms of statutory rights for grievance and disciplinary representation, where we have individual members that seek our assistance and we have access under the terms of statutory rights. There's no forum discussions with us. There's been no discussion about any suggested review with Mike Ashley or anybody else inside the company, nor has there been any discussion with the company forum on any such matters.
I was going to come on to the review. So that was announced by Mr. Ashley 6 months ago. Yeah. What role, if any, have you played? Have you actually seen the findings of the review?
As far as we're concerned or aware, there is no review that's taken place. There's certainly been no discussion with us as the recognised trade union for workers inside the warehouse. There's been no discussion with our members, and there is a workplace forum in place, and there's been no discussion with the workplace forum. Indeed, there's only been one meeting of the workplace forum since it was constituted.
Did Mr. Ashley attend that?
I'm not aware that he did, but I'm not sure. I wasn't in attendance myself.
Bear that clip in mind because it becomes very, very important later on, and I will be saying that a lot, so bear that in mind at the start. Then the chair turned to back pay. Has it been backdated and the workers received it in respect of increases in their wages and salaries? Well, Steve Turner said that they hadn't, but there had been discussions with Sports Direct and HMRC. An agreement had been reached between the company and HMRC, and they were balloting their members, and Sports Direct are doing the same. But what he said after is quite illuminating.
No workers have yet received back pay. We have been in discussions with the company and the Magistrates of Revenue and Customs. An agreement has been reached between us, HMRC and the company. We're currently in the process of balloting and consulting our members on the outcome of that arrangement. The company are doing likewise with their employees, but this only affects employees. As I said, there are only 200 direct employees now inside the warehouse. There are some over 3,000 agency employees who would equally be entitled to back payments for non-payment of national minimum wage, and those discussions are yet to take place. We've been seeking discussions with the two agencies concerned for a considerable period of time, and all of our efforts to meet have been thwarted.
Yes, only 200 employees compared to 3,000 agency workers. Now that becomes important in two parts of this video later on. Next, a very young, fresh-faced Labour MP, Jonathon Reynalds, spoke about Steve's and Luke's roles in a wide variety of industries and workplaces. But then he asked a very interesting question, and Steve and Luke's answer is one of the reasons why I think this video is still prevalent today as it was back then in June 2016.
Can you tell us what, in your view, is different about Sports Direct that has attracted such undue attention? Is there something in the business model which is different there? Is there something in how the workforce is structured which you find different to perhaps comparative businesses?
This is about Sports Direct's business model, and I have to be clear, this is not simply about Sports Direct. This is a business model that we'll find exported across not just retail and hospitality, the traditional areas where you find predominantly precarious work. This is now finding itself into transportation and logistics, supply chains, manufacturing industries, wherever you find agency employment, alongside zero-hours direct employment, you find the same sort of practices. But what Sports Direct do, I think that 1 in 5 retail workers are employed on zero-hours contracts via Sports Direct stores. 1 in 5 on a high street. So this is a business model that has exploitation at the very heart of it. That's our view towards zero-hours employment. Some 79% of all Sports Direct store employees are employed on zero-hours contracts. And if you want a very good understanding of the business model that Sports Direct deploy, I could only refer you back to the Scottish Affairs Select Committee inquiry that took place in 2015, where Keith Halliwell, as the chairman of Sports Direct, gave evidence and was very clear about the nature of the employment relationship.
I think the issue is when you have a system where the majority of your workforce are employed under precarious contracts, be they 0 hours or be they agency contracts, what this leads to is a situation where people do not, in reality, have a recourse to justice. What this means is that it is very, very difficult for them to challenge if things are going wrong within the workplace or they are being treated unfairly. Because if you are on precarious work and you do that, you may find yourself losing your employment, or if on 0 hours, not getting that next shift. Now, inevitably, when there isn't that check and balance, when people aren't able then to challenge if things are wrong, there is a creep. There is a creep to a more and more extreme situation, which is what we're starting to discover here. But it will not be the end of it unless we can find those checks and balances to put in place.
To take specifically to the Shirebrook warehouse, we received a lot of testimony from people, which is of concern. That's obviously that's been in the press as well, and people know about that. And we're going to hear both sides of the story from the businesses and the agencies themselves today about that. But there are a number of statistics which we've seen, which are, from freedom of information requests, they're not in doubt. There are things like the number of ambulances, 76 ambulances called to the warehouse between January 2013 and December 2014. Can you tell us a little bit about that, about the information that's been discovered, and if you think that's typical or atypical of a warehouse of this kind?
This is not typical of a warehouse, although it will become typical of a warehouse if we don't actually do something about the employment practices that are being deployed by Sports Direct. I mean, in reality, even though we've got 3,000 agency workers that are not employed on 0 hours contracts directly inside this warehouse, they are employed on short hour contracts. They're employed on a contract for 336 hours a year, which effectively means that by the time you've hit the end of February in any one year, you're now employed on what is effectively a 0 hours contract, without any guaranteed hours whatsoever. So we would say that the agency workers employed at Sports Direct are equally employed pretty much on a 0 hours contract. And all of the issues that have been raised just then by Luke in terms of the control that the employer has, not just over the hours that you work and whether indeed you work, but the amount of wages that then compensate you as a consequence of that, and the knock-on impact of that on your ability to plan, to pay rent, to put food in front of your children, to make the normal arrangements that anybody that wants to play a normal role within society would want to do so, are denied them because they have no guarantee of whether they're working next week and next month, or indeed how many hours they may be working at any one time. So it's the short hour contract that's as prevalent in terms of Sports Direct and across the wider economy as well as the 0 hours contract itself, and that's something that I think we need to address. There are a number of issues in the contract, and I'd refer you in the appendix, whether you want to go now or certainly later, to Appendix A, and there are copies in Appendix A of the contracts themselves, which are very explicit in the way in which we believe they exploit. Firstly, in terms of the 336-hour contract and the guarantee for only 336 hours per year. We have workers here that give direct testimony to us of being employed for over 4 years and up to nearly 6 years inside Sports Direct and working for these agencies on so-called temporary contracts. I don't know, we're not fruit picking in the world of Kent here. The reality is this is a warehouse that's open for 52 weeks of a year, 24-hour operation, and supplying stores that open 7 days a week. There is no legitimacy for the employment of workers in a precarious way on 0 hours or indeed short hour contracts inside the warehouse or across Sports Direct's wider operation. This is, footfall is well known. The peak periods and the core periods of footfall are known to the business. You can roster and you can make arrangements to provide dignity and respect for a workforce here, a very hard-working, dedicated workforce that provide millions of pounds of profit back to Sports Direct and individually to Mike Ashley as the chief shareholder employed here, and should be recognised. Dignity and respect and justice is a huge, huge issue, and it's being denied to thousands of workers inside this warehouse and across the store's operation. But it's not just about insecurity. It is also about no guarantee on hours, giving absolute control to the employer. We don't have grievance and disciplinary procedures anymore. We simply don't have any further work for you. No further work. So there is no process. There's no access to justice. Even though on paper you may be regarded as an employee and able to access, if indeed you can afford it, the employment tribunal system. The reality is, for most 0 hours workers and short hour workers, you're just simply denied work if you raise a grievance or raise a concern with your employer. There's also tax issues around this. We've done a lot of work around the employer's national insurance contribution, keeping people low paid, keeping people on very low numbers of hours so that the employer can avoid paying 13.8% employer's national insurance. And there's then knock-on impact of that on the employee themselves. They're in and out of work and then reliant on contributory-based benefits, and because they're failing to pay national insurance contributions on a regular basis, get problems every time they're in and out of the welfare system, and therefore find it very, very difficult to have sustainable income during the course of a year to support either themselves or their families.
Jonathon Reynalds then talked about more serious allegations about fair pay and back pay, as well as coercion of female employees into sexual relationships. He asked if the union had tried to rectify these problems. Now, Steve Turner said yes, and then was asked about this in the terms of the business, and what Steve Turner says is very important for later on as well.
Well, we've certainly done that. As a union, we put it in the public domain. In terms of the business, not that we're aware of at all. There's certainly been no discussion. We've written to the company and the agencies concerned because, of course, whilst we would deny Mike Ashley and Sports Direct the ability to outsource their responsibility to agencies for the employment of workers inside their operation, this is directly the responsibility of Sports Direct. It is the agencies that are the employer. And we've written to the agencies on a number of occasions and not even had the courtesy of a reply from one of them and a curt reply from the second. So there has been no willingness on the part of the agencies to engage with us in any constructive way, in any way at all, actually, to try and resolve the genuine concerns and difficulties that have been raised with us and continue to be raised with us day in, day out, week in, week out.
Yes or no answer, if you could, Mr Turner. These allegations have been live for a number of months, if not years, but certainly December, there were allegations in The Guardian and on the BBC. Yeah. Since that 6-month period, have you seen any improvement whatsoever in working conditions in Shirebrook?
No. There's been changes. No, but there has been changes to the way in which people are searched and clock out. There's been a different system employed inside the warehouse. There's been better access and egress introduced, which makes that process quicker. It's not changed the process.
That's better. That's an improvement.
That's an improvement, but it's not changed the issues that arise from searches on the way out of the premises.
Thank you.
Tory MP Chris Wright asked, do people still not get paid for these searches? I'm only saying this because the audio was awful and I had to check the transcript to know what he actually said.
No, they don't get paid for the searches. That's not working time, but the 20 pence increase to the minimum wage that was introduced as a consequence of non-payment of national minimum wage, that's the reality of it, covers that and prevents the further claim.
That's very helpful. Amanda?
Yes, you are not only treated like a common criminal and a thief and treated as though you are guilty before proven innocent. If you are still in the queue waiting to be searched after your finishing time, you don't even get paid for it either. Again, This comes up later on, like many other things that keep cropping up in this meeting. And another thing kept cropping up was a question from Tory MP Amanda Milling, where she asked, are you familiar with the prepayment cards that is used and how common are they? Now, I'm only saying this because the audio isn't the best and she's quite softly spoken. But Steve Turner's reply will blow you away.
Well, we've not come across it, actually. We're a union of 1.4 million members that operate across all sectors pretty much of the economy. And we've not come across the level of exploitation in the use of prepaid debit cards. We have workers here predominantly from Eastern Europe that are recruited in Eastern Europe. English is a second, if not third language, are brought across to the UK and then, because they have no bank account, offered the facility of a prepaid debit card. They're charged £10 for the issuing of the prepaid debit card, and then they're charged a monthly management fee of £10 for the pleasure of having their wages placed on the debit card. They're then charged, of course, 75 pence every time they use it in an ATM machine, and charged again 10 pence for every time they receive a text message confirming that they've withdrawn money or used their card. We know the card issuer, and the card issuer makes a £2 a month management fee charge, not a £10 charge. So who's making £8 out of this process? We don't know. Equally, the card issuer makes no charge for the issuing of the cards, and yet the workers themselves are charged £10 for the issuing of a card. So they may be questions for others that you might want to ask.
Amanda Milling quietly asked, what are your views about the use of prepayment cards for payroll purposes?
Well, we would oppose it. I mean, people used to get paid in cash. Now they're paid directly into bank accounts. Of course, it's very difficult for migrant labour to have easy access to a bank account. You need to have proof of address. Very often they're living in shared accommodation. The electricity bill is not in their name. The account, the house is not in their name. They can't provide the evidence that may be required now, under statute, for a very good reason, by the way, to open bank account. And where they can't, they have to find another mechanism for being paid. But there are other ways in which you could do this that are not as exploitative. These are minimum wage workers, and yet they find themselves receiving a bill for £10 just simply for the pleasure of being paid.
Mr Turner, can I ask about that? Given that they're on minimum wage, and there may have been a 15 pence an hour increase, and we might come on to that, but with the £10 monthly charge, 75 pence transaction fee, does that push them under the minimum wage? Have you got any evidence to suggest that happens?
Well, it would do, but where this is a moral question perhaps rather than a legal one, the reality is they're asked to sign a piece of paper that reaches an agreement with the employer to issue the card, and therefore this becomes a service agreement and not a deduction from wages. We believe that this is a deduction from wages. If you can't be paid your wages monthly without a charge being imposed on you for whatever reason, then that should be a deduction from earnings.
Amanda Millings then, very quietly, asked, can you tell me about the insurance fees that they also have to pay?
Yeah, well, I wish I could tell you about the insurance. We've tried on a number of occasions to get answers to why it is that insurance services deductions are made from people's wages, and I'll refer you to wage slips that we've incorporated into our evidence, body of evidence for you, where insurance services are deducted up to £2.45 per week. These are employees of an agency, so I'm not quite sure what they're insuring themselves against. The workers themselves, and if you read the personal testimonies that are equally provided inside the documents we've provided, are very clear about that as well, where they have asked and are unclear about why they're having monies deducted for insurance services. This is perhaps a question for the agencies themselves.
Again, is this something which you see to be common? Do you see this elsewhere?
We've never seen this.
So you're telling me you've not seen the use of prepayment cards or insurances?
No, we see it in these agencies elsewhere. These agencies employ workers across different sectors of the economy where we have members as well, and we see these same practices. This is an agency, in respect of one of them, Transline, had their licence revoked by the Game Masters Licensing Authority when they operated in the food industry. Of course, the Game Masters Licensing Authority is restricted in its scope, and it's one of our recommendations in our briefing that the scope of the Game Masters Licensing Authority for licensing and regulation and enforcement be extended across all sectors of the economy. This is a company denied a licence in one sector of the economy and then free at will to operate in exactly the same way for which it was denied a licence in food elsewhere across the retail sector.
Don't worry, this comes up later on, and you will not be surprised as to the reason why they are doing this. Very shocking, isn't it? But not as shocking as what you are about to hear next, when former SNP MP, and if I remember rightly, now a MSP MP Michelle Thompson asked this question, and Luke Primarello's reply will leave you shocked.
Michelle?
Yeah, we've been touching on it in this session. I'd like you just to describe the culture of Sports Direct.
In the warehouse, there is a culture of fear. Of people are scared. People are scared because they are working under a system that they know they could lose their employment at any moment. They are working under, and it's one of the appendices that we've given you, the strike system. This is a system that means those who work through the agency actually don't have any recourse to a disciplinary. They don't have any recourse to defend themselves if they're accused of something they've done wrong. They're given a strike. Now, strikes can be arbitrary, and there is no comeback. There is no arguing about it. You can have a strike for spending too long in the toilet. You can have a strike for excessive chatting. You can have a strike for taking a day off sick or having to stay home because your children are sick. Now, the problem with that, when you have people under that much fear, they come into work ill. And when you get presenteeism in the workplace, that creates a significant health and safety risk. Because these people are now not only a risk to themselves, but they're a risk to those they are working with. Now, when we refer back to the Freedom of Information Act with East Midlands Ambulance Service, you will see in there not just that it's 110 call-outs for the ambulance service, but you'll see 34 for chest pains. You'll see there are strokes in there. You'll see that there are 5 births or miscarriages or pregnancy-related issues in there, one of which was someone giving birth within a toilet, and the last one happened in November of 2015.
Mr. Bennett, you aren't seriously suggesting that you're given a strike if you're giving birth?
You're given a strike if you don't attend work. And so people attend work when they shouldn't be at work. That's the reality of this. And 6 strikes, and it's Appendix D in your packs, 6 strikes, and you'll see the criteria in Appendix D: excessive chatting, excessive or long toilet breaks, wearing branded goods, a period of reported sickness. A period of reported sickness warrants a strike. 6 strikes, and it's very clear, any person who exceeds 6 strikes within a rolling 6-month period will have their assignment at Sports Direct ended. So people come to work. Pregnant women come to work and end up being taken to hospital by ambulance, or giving birth in a toilet, in a warehouse, on one occasion in 2014.
So going back to culture then, how does the culture compare with the warehouse as compared to the retail outlets where there's more employees? Is there a difference, or do you see the same predominance of culture?
There is still a culture within the retail arm where people are scared, and there is a culture, we believe, of bullying as well, and certainly have had some information on that. Now, the difference there, the different control mechanism there, is what you're dealing with is people on 0 hours. People being pressured to come into work when perhaps they don't want to because they don't think they're going to get another shift, and there's still the issues that we obviously raised earlier of that fear of challenging if something is wrong, being scared, where are my next hours coming from? How am I going to pay my rent? How am I going to put food on the table?
Michelle Thompson spoke about a staff forum and asked if they knew of any mechanisms to help change the culture on staff feedback. Now, Steve Turner said he hadn't, and that it was only for the use of the 200 Sports Direct employees. Then the chair asked who did they think was at fault here.
Well, I think clearly that comes from the top. This is an arrogance and a contempt, actually, at the very highest level of this business. And it's a manner in which they believe that they can operate. We have it described to us as a gulag, as Victorian, as a workhouse, not a warehouse. We believe that there's no place for these sort of 19th century working practices in 21st century Britain. And it's actually built an alliance with the Institute of Directors and many others and ourselves against the deployment of 0 hours.
And is that culture from the top also set on behalf of the agencies?
Well, I don't think you can outsource responsibility. You can't hand over £50 million a year to 2 agencies and think that's it, I have no responsibility for the practices that are deployed then inside my warehouse. The wages and terms and conditions are exactly the same across the 2. The terms and conditions are exactly the same. The strike system is exactly the same. This has been predetermined by Sports Direct. This is not something that two agencies under their own volition have introduced.
£50 million a year for two agencies. Now, I've said this a number of times. This does come up later on. Now, Chris White spoke about the shocking safety record and asked, how does it compare to other businesses? Luke Primarello said it's on a level of its own and said he will be happy to submit the comparisons to the committee if they wanted. But Tory MP Craig Tracey brought up the subject of poor training.
Some of the evidence that we've heard has been around poor training, limited inductions, and from the management structure, a lack of knowledge of employee rights. Yeah. I just wonder what your experience was of that?
I think there's a contempt for employee rights, actually. I don't think there's a lack of understanding. I don't think it's necessarily an issue that I think is relevant. When you employ people on the sorts of contracts that they're employed on, you find yourself viewing the human being as a disposable asset. And there's a price to pay. All these cost down, cost reductions, cheapest product, and constant sale, 90% off has a price. And the price is paid, whether that's in the manufacturing of these goods somewhere else in the world, or the transportation of these goods across the globe, or indeed in a warehouse or a retail operation. Workers are paying the price of us getting cheap goods, and that's not opposition to people being able to use Sports Direct as an avenue to purchase goods that they want to purchase at a reduced price. This is just the natural consequence of this constant drive down in cost.
Have you looked at the actual management structure and training structure internally and reviewed that, or have you seen the evidence of the processes?
Well, we'd like to. We've offered our expertise across many sectors of the economy, dealing with many hundreds, if not thousands, of employers to improve working conditions, productivity and relationships inside the workplace. We've had no responses back that are constructive from either the agencies or from Sports Direct. And that offer remains on the table. We're a trade union that wants to do good business with good employers. There are serious issues that have been raised here with us consistently, and we try to resolve those in a constructive, positive way with the employers. But this is a two-way street, and unfortunately we're back in one direction at the moment.
Labour MP Peter Kyle asked about the culture of corruption in the workplace, where he wanted to know, is this corruption going on with full knowledge of management, or is it happening while the management's back is turned?
I can't believe that people walk around a warehouse operation with their eyes closed. I can't believe that is the case, and I don't believe that that's the case. I think this is a determined business model, and that business model is rolled out from the highest levels within inside Sports Direct as an operation.
So an instruction would have come down from the top.
This is their business model.
Screw down costs to the point where it will impact on someone's health and well-being.
Absolutely. And there's no need for this. There is no reason whatsoever as to why employees couldn't be employed directly inside the warehouse. Why they go for, in fact, it would cost less. You might actually be able to pay people beyond the 20 pence above minimum wage if you took out the cost of the agencies. There is no reason to employ people on 0 hours contracts inside the stores or on 336 hour contracts inside the warehouse. This is a 52-week of the year
Have you ever
operation.
seen anything that comes close to this in your experience and the scale?
Not on this scale, no. Not on this scale. But the fear, of course, and we're seeing it. We see some of these agencies employing workers elsewhere across the economy. We have direct relationships with the workforce themselves who tell us that exactly the same issues are raised in those circumstances with those employers in exactly the same way as they'd be employed at Sports Direct. So this is a creeping model.
Again, the 336-hour contracts come back later on. Yeah, I know I'm saying this a lot, but these guys are really setting the groundwork. But Tory Richard Fuller, who comes in with a massive zinger later on, basically asks, why would anyone run a company like this? Steve Turner said, I can't answer that, and it's probably a question for Mike Ashley himself. Then he also said that this goes to the heart of corporate and social responsibility, and why the Institute of Directors are supporting their campaign to bring dignity and respect into the workplace, and what we are witnessing now is a race to the bottom. And if nothing is done about this, this would be the new prominent employment model, and then there will be consequences to our economy. Well, Michelle Thompson spoke again about safety breaches. But I will leave you with the final question by the chair and Stephen Turner's really interesting reply.
Gentlemen, very final question. If you could be brief, I'd be grateful. Is the key problem a question of enforcement of existing legislation, or legislation as it currently stands doesn't address employment protection?
Legislation, as we see it, doesn't address it. We've given a number of recommendations in our pack, so I won't refer to them now because of the time, but they're in the end of the last page of our briefing, page 11. In New Zealand, they've outlawed 0 hours contracts, and all of those employers, your Kentucky Fried Chickens, your Burger Kings, your McDonald's, your Starbucks, all of those that required flexibility in their workforce and therefore the issuing of 0 hours contracts, now employ all of their people on rosters, on guaranteed hours, without any hiccups or without any problems. That's happened in New Zealand, and we should look at doing that here. We should certainly look at extending the role of the Game Masters Licensing Authority, its scope and its remit, beyond simply food and agriculture, because you've got agencies now operating across the economy, banned in one and yet able to operate freely elsewhere in exactly the same manner. And there's a number of other recommendations that I'll leave with you, Chair, in that regard as well.
Interesting final statement, wasn't it? Now, this was in 2016, so things could very well have improved, so who knows. But back then, very shocking stuff, wasn't it? Well, that was the first of 3 meetings, and the second one was with one of the agency firms that supply Sports Direct its dog's body. Its employees, Transline Group, with the managing director Chris Birkby, Jennifer Hardy, the finance director, and Andy Sweeney, the CEO, for the aptly named the Best Connection Group. Oh, they also brought someone who wasn't invited.
And who are you, sir?
I'm Peter Wilson Legal. I'm a solicitor who represents the Best Connection Group.
Do you mind if you just sit at the back, because you're not part of the formal panel? Thank you very much for that.
Why bring a solicitor to a select committee meeting? I don't know, but that did set off my cynical senses, as if to say, what you scared of? Well, the chair, Iain Wright, no, not that Iain Wright, this Iain Wright, started off and watched the buzzwords and the guarded replies.
Could I ask each of you, what's the nature of your contract with Sports Direct?
We provide temporary labour to Sports Direct.
Temporary?
Yeah, that's Shirebrook and flexible at Shirebrook and Wigan.
Is that true for you as well, Mr. Smith?
We provide temporary flexible labour to Sports Direct.
Do you mind me asking how much you're paid by Sports Direct?
I think that's a commercially sensitive question that would impact our business beyond the Sports Direct contract.
What proportion of your turnover is derived from the Sports Direct contract?
It's in excess of 20 million.
No, as a proportion of turnover?
Proportion would be 10%.
And what about you?
Just under 10%.
Could I ask, do you set the rates for the workers?
No.
So who sets that? Is that Sports Direct says this is what we want to pay?
Yes.
Okay. And how does... So what value do you add? Why doesn't Sports Direct just simply employ people directly on similar contracts? Why spend money giving you services?
Large businesses will use an agency to ensure their workforce does remain flexible.
What do you mean by that?
Well, if there's an influx in volumes, change of business, that using the agency allows them to increase and decrease their workforce accordingly.
How much, to what degree are the workforces flexed? We've heard already that Shirebrook operates on a 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year model, and it doesn't flex that much. There may be additional stock at Christmas, there may be additional stock now as we go into the Euros, but other than that, actually, activity is very well planned. Why do you need that flex, and to what extent is there flexibility?
Yeah, so you're right, their workforce isn't a large flexing workforce, so the average hours of our staff on site for Q4 last year were 39 hours, and in Q1 this year, the average hours has been 32 hours. Why they choose to use that is theirs, but that's why we provide our service, to give that option to a customer.
But could you just give me a flavour as to what extent would they flex 20% in certain weeks? Would they flex down 30%?
No.
What would be the flow of work?
The way that they do it at Shirebrook is, instead of doing that, they will flex from a 5-day working week to a 4-day working week. Rather than losing staff or laying staff off, they would flex up from 5 days to 4 days and backwards and forwards.
Which is actually a much better position compared to some other industry standard mechanisms, so you do tend to keep your workforce.
It helps you sustain the staff.
Yeah.
What's the turnover of staff at Shirebrook?
The average attrition weekly is between 1.5% and 2% of our workforce. Our workforce is currently 1,700.
Yeah.
So as a standard, we would look between up to 2% before it would be a cause for concern.
Mr. Sweeney, could I ask the same questions of you?
For the best connection also.
Okay.
I noticed they all repeated the words temporary and flexible. And then the guarded response about how much do Sports Direct pay them. Then Jennifer Hardy blurted out in excess of 20 million when asked what proportion of your turnover is derived from the Sports Direct contract. Very interesting. Also, it's Sports Direct that sets the wages was very interesting too. Well, the softly spoken Amanda Milling asked what type of contract they use for agency staff of Shirebrook. Chris Birkby said they used the 336 contract. Amanda asked why, and this is what Jennifer Hardy said.
It gives the flexibility that our client needs. It's a very standard contract within the industry. It's not something that is restricted to the Shirebrook site. It's not a 0 hours contract, and it provides the worker with the usual employment rights that any other worker would get, and they're protected by the agency workers regulations as well with that contract. We would feel it's a good contract for those workers, and provides them with disciplinary processes and all the kinds of things that you'd expect a standard employee in any other workplace to operate under.
And who decides on that nature of that contract, the 336? Is that yourselves or is that Sports Direct?
We would discuss it with Sports Direct.
Which contract we would use, you mean?
Yeah.
That'd be us.
That'd be ours. They would be aware of it.
And why 336? Why?
Because that's HMRC's minimum requirement when they've looked at the contractual basis of employees.
Mr. Sweeney, the nature of your contract?
That's connection. Temporary workers are employed in a similar manner on 336 hours contract and have the rights to annual leave, statutory sick pay, maternity, paternity pay.
Remember when the topic of conversation turned to these prepayment cards with Stephen Turner? This is where it gets very interesting.
In the last session, you would have seen that I asked some questions around prepayment cards. What proportion of your agency staff are using these prepayment cards for?
We'd have to get back to you on that, but I want to explain to you why we use prepayment cards and what the prepayment card offers. Prepayment cards were brought in because we were, if someone doesn't have a bank account, paying that person by cheque can do two things. It can delay the time it takes them to get their wages, what they've waited for. Not only that, we found that a lot of candidates were having to go into towns, and if they wanted to speed that process up, they would then go and pay really high processing fee checks with cash checking companies and stuff like that. And the other thing that we've tried to negate is people being paid into sort of the same bank account. We wanted to make sure that we knew that the person who was in the money was going to them. So the prepayment card gave us that ability. It's not forced, it's an optional benefit, it's an option if you want to use it, whether you take it up or not. And it can also be dropped as soon as you've got a bank account. So if the people that start with us and they don't have a bank account, they can move from prepayment cards onto a bank account from there.
It's not mandatory. It's not a mandatory requirement. It's just we're trying to give an assistance.
Why don't you help people open a bank account instead?
And we do. And many sites we would invite. We've got big partners such as Barclays and companies like that. They will come in and they will help set up those bank accounts. But it's those initial days when you first couple of weeks and you've got to get that first payment in. We want to make sure that we can get them money to them as fast as we can, rather than delaying it in any way, shape or form.
Sorry to interrupt, Amanda, but on that point then, so is the average amount of time that a person would use a prepayment card very limited?
It's totally dependent on the person. Some people prefer it. Some of the benefits they have is transferring money from here to foreign bank accounts, for example. That gives them a better facility. There's loads of benefits of using those prepayment cards. We also have things that the perk box, we call it. Yeah. It's a company that provides that gives them other benefits that they can use by using that. So it's there to help them in any way that we can.
Sorry, Amanda, I interrupted.
Amanda Milling asked Andy Sweeney if they use these prepayment cards, and he said that they didn't. I'm only jumping in here because the audio is pretty bad, but I'm whiffing a bit of bull from their reasons for using prepayment cards. What do you guys think?
Can you tell the committee who provides the prepayment card? Who the supplier is?
Qantas, yes, Qantas.
And Who chose Qantas?
It was a member of our
our commercial
director.
And these prepayment cards, do you use them with for other companies that you do business with?
Yeah.
With Qantas as well?
Yeah.
So, in terms of the fees, there's a £10 set-up fee and then a £10 monthly management fee. There's lots of other fees as well. Can you explain where those fees go?
So it's all charged by Qantas. We don't deduct anything from the temp. They charge it from their cards. We give them the platform to use it, give the people the applications to use it, and they charge the temps direct.
So you're telling me that the £10 fee, the monthly fee, all goes to Qantas?
No. So then we have commercials with them on a numbers that are supplied, and then we get a monthly rebate from them.
But it's not significant. We can come back to you on the actual.
And that goes solely to you. You don't share that with Sports Direct in any shape.
No.
Now, my cynical mind and my ears pricked up when Chris Birkby admitted that they get a monthly rebate. Now, if they're getting some sort of financial gain, why wouldn't you push these prepayment cards on those vulnerable? Now, I could be wrong, but for me, they looked rather shady when he mentioned the rebate, and their reasoning for the cards sounded even more shady to me. But Amanda Milling then moved on to insurance.
And in terms of insurance, there are various insurances that these agency staff are also paying towards. It can vary between 45 pence and £2.45.
We don't do insurance. We don't do any insurance.
You don't do any insurance?
We provide a voluntary, it's a voluntary scheme where they can avail themselves of personal accident insurance if they wish. Some do, some don't.
What was the process of signing these staff to this insurance?
They sign a declaration that they wish to have the insurance and authorise us to deduct the cost, which we transmit to the insurance company.
Somebody sit down and actually explain what this insurance is for?
Yes, when the temporary worker is recruited, it is explained what the insurance is, and they are asked whether or not they would like to take it.
And how can it vary between 45 pence and £2.45? That's quite a broad bandwidth.
The principle that it works upon is the temporary worker is covered for the insurance from when they leave home to work, during work, and then back to home. And it is charged to the temporary worker on the basis of a cost per hour worked. So that's why you have a variation.
My understanding is that there are, I've heard reports that people don't necessarily know that they've signed up to this insurance, when they don't understand the insurance product, why they've actually got this. Can you kind of try and explain why that might be the case?
I can't explain why that is not the case. When they are recruited, as I said earlier, they are told about it, they're being informed about it, it's explained, and if they wish to avail themselves of it, they sign. If they don't sign.
Now, when I was listening to the conversation, red flags just blew up in my brain, especially on the bit about insurance for getting to work and going home from work. And his reply about people not knowing that they've signed up to this insurance didn't fill me with much confidence either. But Craig Tracey made a mockery of the whole system by asking Transline, if you don't use the same model, who provides the employee's liability insurance for the staff at Sports Direct? And Jennifer Hardy said that they have their own insurance policy, and when asked if this covers them essentially as contracted, she said yes. Now, do you remember in the early meeting where the 6 strikes and you're out came up? Jonathon Reynalds also brings up Transline's licence to supply labour for the food industry being revoked on the basis the directors were found not to be fit and product people, and keep an eye out for Jennifer Hardy's coughing fit. This is important at the end.
You said in your earlier evidence to the chair that the rates of pay were set by Sports Direct. In terms of the other employment terms, again, are they set by yourselves or by Sports Direct? And who, for instance, defines a long toilet break for the employees?
In the agency workers' regulations after 12 weeks, the temporary workers have a right to the same employment conditions as Sports Direct workers.
But the terms, the bits of the employment contract are set by Sports Direct, by the client, not by yourselves as the suppliers of labour. Is that correct?
So we manage the Sports Direct terms and conditions and what they want our working staff to do. If we disagreed with those, though, obviously we would be pointing that out and dealing with it as a collective.
So have you ever disagreed with the client, with Sports Direct, about the terms in which people are employed that you supply?
So when we talk about the queuing piece with regards to the clocking machines, that was a joint piece of work that happened. We obviously started to get some noise around that, which was built up from the fast growth of the site, and that we worked together on that to reduce that and to get it sorted out. I think what we have done is we've worked with them on not defining so small what is a strike and what isn't a strike. Mm-hmm. And the strikes are there as far as we're concerned, as to ensure that we manage to a safe environment and ensure that the attendance policies that are adhered to that we deliver on our promise to Sports Direct to the customer.
For both of you, do you feel a duty of care towards the people you supply to work for Sports Direct?
Definitely.
Yeah.
And particularly the question for you guys from Transline from the previous session. We heard evidence that the Gangmasters Licensing Authority had revoked Transline's licence to supply, I think, labour for the food industry on the basis that the directors were found not to be fit and proper persons. Is that correct?
We had an administrative error on our side, which led to us being unable to obtain a licence. We've led to our licence being able to go through an application process, which in turn we actually only supplied one client, which was 0.8% of our business, and during that process we no longer supplied that client, so we actually removed ourselves from the process and didn't continue to actually with the application process because we don't actually supply the food sector and don't require a Gangmaster licence.
Are you legally entitled to supply labour to the food industry?
No, because we don't hold a Gangmaster licence. But it was our administrative error that led to that. It wasn't some misdemeanour.
See, I mean, I think a lot of people, to be honest, would look at that and say that if a company is not in a position legally to supply labour to one sector of the economy, why should it be permitted to do so to another sector? Do you not think that's unreasonable?
I think the Gangmaster Licensing Agency is set up for a very specific reason, which it was down to the cocker pickers, wasn't it? And it's not something that would be inherent in every warehouse in the country, and they did cover one of our customers, and that's why we held a licence. We don't operate in that sector, so we wouldn't be required to hold a licence.
Final question, Chair. Since the media reports first began to surface around Sports Direct, have you taken any steps yourselves, either with the client or with perhaps the unions or any kind of workplace representatives, to look into those, to try and find an evidential basis for them yourselves, or taking any action accordingly?
Yeah, so the local team, I've done a lot actually. So each thing to come out in the press they've focused on, so such as queuing times, etc. But some of the other stuff that we've done is we're part of a committee called the NG20 Committee, which is a committee that's Sports Direct, the agencies, local police, council, church leaders, and we're looking at how we integrate the whole site. The site does heavily affect Shirebrook, and we want to make sure that committee is really beneficial as some of these problems. We also make sure that we now hold regular HR surgeries for our staff, so that if they've got a voice, they've got somewhere to say what they need to do. And we hold we do surveys on our staff, so we'll do anonymous surveys via SurveyMonkey, and we'll do them on site. For example, we held one last week just before we came here, just a sort of a basic satisfaction survey. 96% of our staff were satisfied and above. That doesn't show a workforce that are unhappy.
Just one supplementary to that. Obviously, that feels like it's very inconsistent with the testing meetings and the public and to this committee. Are you genuinely telling us you're satisfied that you think there are not the problems that have been reported at Shirebrook, or do you feel you're just not getting to the bottom for whatever reason that might be?
I believe there are problems. I'm definitely not saying there are not problems. There are problems, but I believe that the problems that arise by such fast growth of the business, and some of these problems have been created by volume. So, such as the clocking out. That's the fact that the amount of people that have going through those machines. It's out. For me, the focus should be on how these problems are dealt with quickly and moved away to the workforce.
And we've seen that those problems have been dealt with, and as they've been raised in the media, and in contact with both us and with Sports Director, we work together to eradicate those, and we see there's massive improvement on site.
Miss Hardy, you had a coughing fit.
Yeah, apologies.
No, not at all. I mean, it's dreadful when that happens, and I'm glad that you were able to get a glass of water. We've been told that if you ask for a glass of water outside of designated breaks, you'd get a strike. Is that fair?
I'm not quite sure that's actually the case, and I couldn't comment on in individual circumstances that have happened. And I would say no, it's probably not fair. But in normal working environments, would you be entitled to a break every time you so wished? You wouldn't. It's not going beyond a normal working environment. It's trying to keep people to normal breaks, normal lunch hours. And I think if they require water, you should be able to have a drink of water. I'm not disputing that.
Thank you.
Good question about the gangmaster licence, I think. If you were not given a licence in one industry for whatever reason, why should they be given the opportunity to do the same in another industry? Jennifer Hardy's reasons on that did sound a little bit off for me, and I could be wrong about that. Also, when Chris Birkby said there are problems that arise by such fast growth of a business, that comes up later on, and the satisfactory survey comes up as well very, very soon. But for me, the star of the show, Labour MP Paul Blomfield, especially with Mike Ashley, absolutely hilarious. But sit back, enjoying pickles in their 0 hours contract and the Employment Act of 1996, and the pauses after the questioning are deafening. And also watch the guy behind Andy Sweeney. His body language is very visible.
If I could move to the contract, Mr. Berkeley, you said that on average this year, I think staff are working 32 hours a week. Yep. Last year, 39 hours a week. This is an operation over 52 weeks. I'm really curious to understand why you therefore issue a contract simply for 7 weeks. For 336 hours. What brought you to that point?
I think we've already sort of answered this question. It's around HMRC guidance.
Let me, if I may then ask you a question. Are you aware of Section 27A of the Employment Rights Act of 1996?
Not specifically.
Well, that's a provision that enables, gives 0 hours contract workers the opportunity to work elsewhere. Mm-hmm. So it sort of negates the attempt by employers to impose exclusivity on workers. It's also the threshold. The 336 hours is the threshold at which workers lose those rights under the Employment Rights Act. Were you aware of that?
No, I feel that our contract has been written with the agency workers regulations in mind rather than that.
So it's simply a coincidence that 336 hours is the point at which those workers would lose those rights that they would otherwise accrue under the Employment Rights Act.
It's that I can't comment because I'd have to come back to you on that point.
Okay, can I ask then? I mean, people talk about in defending the kind of all-pervasive 0 hours contracts, that it gives workers flexibility. What flexibility do your workers have in refusing shifts or refusing hours without that being considered against them?
So if they were scheduled in as part of the ongoing weeks, they would have. If they took it without authorised leave, then it would be classed as a strike, and then that would six cases of that could lead.
This is after they've worked their 336 hours. What constitutes authorised leave?
So pre-booked holidays.
No. They're contracted for 336 hours. They've worked their 336 hours. They then have a flexible arrangement. So what constitutes authorised leave?
I mean, aren't people being offered hours, given the option
Talking about
to decline?
an assignment within that contract.
Yeah.
So when they're on those contracts, they operate assignments which can start or end within that period.
So the advantage of this contract is that it actually doesn't provide even the flexibility that a 0 hours contract offers for the employee.
Say that again, sorry.
Well, a 0 hours contract,
Yeah.
the defence of it is it provides two-way flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
What you're saying is that after your staff have worked above 336 hours, they don't have two-way flexibility because they have to go for authorised leave.
I think with this contract, it's designed to give them the employment rights that any other worker would be. So if you went back 10 years, the agency workers...
What additional employment rights
so you
does this contract give?
You would get the employment rights, so you get disciplinary processes and all that kind of thing you would expect under a normal workplace. If you went pre-AWR, you would have found a very different type of contract in place where you can just hire
You said that this contract gives workers rights that they wouldn't enjoy under the 0 hours contract. What are those rights?
Well,
if a temporary worker wished not to work because he didn't want to work for 4 weeks for whatever reason, then he's free not to work for 4 weeks. He's still employed by the Best Connection under that contract. And when he came back to us saying, well, I've done what I wanted to do for 4 weeks, would you please put me on another assignment? We would find another assignment for him, and that assignment could well be at Sports Direct, back at Sports Direct. If he didn't want to go back to Sports, or she didn't want to go back to Sports Direct, we would look for assignments in branches local to that area. So the flexibility they have is that they can work when they want, and we will help them to find those assignments.
The contract that the workers sign up to says, and I quote, "Unless there is good cause, you must accept any suitable assignment offered by the company." Just explain the flexibility to me.
well, you would, because we need to keep people in employment. That's our job, isn't it? To keep people want to work, and in a good cause, it can range from a number of things.
Sorry, you
We're
said
not being
the
restricted
contract
in that
offered
matter.
flexibility, but actually the contract says you must accept any assignment.
But it doesn't actually define a good cause. So I would say good cause can be a range of matters. If someone said I'm going to visit someone for 2 weeks, they wouldn't be penalised for that. We're just saying, if you want working with us, ideally we want to get you placed as best we can.
So just give me an example, give me a full flavour of the good causes which would be permissible for people to decline work in this flexible environment that you're offering.
I won't be able to give an example because, it's not something that I would...
You can't give examples of good causes.
Well, good cause, as I said, would be if someone said, I'm visiting someone for 2 weeks, I'm doing, anything beyond... We have some, in other sectors of our business, we can have people who go work for other agencies, for example, and then can come back to us on seasonal work and, various things like that. We're not restricting those individuals. It's just that contract is just basically saying we would like to work for us, and if you can, we would want to understand why you're not. And if they're not going to work for us beyond that point, we will then obviously issue a P45 and they can go off on the merry way and do what they wish.
So if they declined an assignment, they would probably get P45.
No, I'm not saying that's not what I said.
How the contract works.
That's not
but
what I
said. Can I just ask you? You said earlier that you discussed these contracts with Mr. Ashley. So
I wouldn't say that we would discuss them with Mr. Ashley. I believe that his sports director will be aware of the type of contract we operate under.
Presumably, in the negotiations, it's giving you the contract for supplying them with labour. They talked about the contractual terms, so they knew what contracts you offered, and that was the base. That was understood as part of your deal with them.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Can I just ask a follow-up? We've got in front of us evidence supplied, and in terms of Transline, it says, and you were talking about flexibility and what have you, but it says, Transline reserves the right to end an assignment at any time without reason, notice or liability. Why is that included in there?
This is on the strikes policy. So I apologise, we can't see what you're actually reading.
That's your company paper, isn't it?
Okay. Yeah.
So the strikes policy there, so we started supplying Sports Direct 2 years ago, taking over from a previous agency, and we came in and used the same strike policy they was using. That's how we operate as a business. We don't have our own standard strike policy. We would use what a company uses on their sites. So that, I think that's the old policy.
But there's a circumstance, following on from Paul's line of questioning, I'd like to go and visit my family who are overseas. I'd like to go away for 3 or 4 weeks. Is that reasonable?
Yes.
On a basis of that, you just say, I don't even have to give you a reason, you're out.
Yeah, that's not how it is. So you'd apply for leave.
I've got it in writing, but it is.
The strikes policy is designed to... It's not there to be a punishment. It's not there to just get rid of people. It's not in our interest. It's not in our interest to be turning the staff all the time, because that costs a lot of money and it hinders the operation. Our interest is to keep staff on site, maintain health and safety and their welfare on site. You'll see a lot of the other strike policies relate to not wearing headphones. So if someone got run over by a forklift truck without headphones in, we'd then be asked the question, why don't you prevent people wearing headphones? And it's there. It's designed to prevent people from for health and safety, for not turning up to work. We're expected to turn up to work every day, as is everybody else. And if we didn't call in, we would be penalised for that, or at least have a discussion. And that's what it's designed to do. And when you've got a large numbers of people on site, there's a very limited ways that you can get that policy out there.
Very illuminating, yeah. Now, for me, that bit of evidence really does give credence to the evidence Luke Primarello gave about people working at Sports Direct are ruled by fear, doesn't it? Now, great work by Iain Wright. No, not Iain Wright, but great work by him too, you got to admit. Well, former Tory MP Amanda Solloway continued the questioning about employment rights and about why would a company like Sports Direct employ mainly agency workers. Watch for Jennifer Hardy's little word slip. Also, what Andy Sweeney says is very interesting too.
First of all, can I just check when you were talking about employment rights, and I think you mentioned the fact that they're entitled to employment rights, for example, the disciplinary process. Did I hear correctly on that?
Yeah, might have been me.
Okay, because I also just heard, as an example, when you talk about employee rights, if they don't turn up, they can discipline them. I'm just concerned what the positive employment rights that you have.
Redundancy pay would be a positive.
Would it? Okay.
Say for example, if redundancies are not necessarily, they're not. Sometimes they're a business requirement. Any business could make redundancies. But under a 0 hours contract, for example, you possibly wouldn't be entitled to any redundancy pay under 336. That's
but we're talking about employment because I think just for my clarification, what I'm just trying to get my head around is where the benefit is on going through your agencies. And I'm thinking, if there's how many people are we talking about are employed, go to Shirebrook weekly?
1,700, roughly 1,700 for the Best Connection.
Yeah, 1,700.
About the same thing.
Which is a vast amount of the workforce. Which I'm just trying to see why there aren't permanent contracts available. Who gets the benefit of this, of using an agency?
To an extent, there is a benefit to Sports Direct because they can have a slimmer overhead because we are responsible for the recruitment of all of the temporary workers.
Yes, apparently redundancy is a positive. To be fair, probably realised when she'd opened her mouth she'd just put her foot in it, and we're all guilty of that, aren't we? So, not laughing at you, Jennifer, we're just laughing near you and just pulling your leg. So easy mistake to make. But Andy Sweeney's line about hiring agency workers for slimmer overheads and all that, this comes back big style. Well, Amanda Sweeney moved on to the welfare of the workers, but Tory MP Richard Fuller carried on with that and made a bit of a price chomp out of Andy Sweeney, with his not mincing his words with his zinger.
Do you believe that some of the workers that you supplied to Sports Direct were mistreated?
No. I don't believe that. I believe that certainly what we heard earlier from Unite wholly misrepresents the situation at Shirebrook, which is a modern distribution warehouse where the concerns of all of the workers are catered for. I would encourage you all to visit the site, because all the negative press has misrepresented what the site is about.
Mr. Sweeney, are you aware of the phrase new meat?
No.
We had evidence of someone who works at Shirebrook. The phrase new meat is commonly used by people who work there regarding new female employees. Have you had any feedback about that at your organisation?
No.
Have you heard of people being called selfish because they felt that they should leave at the end of their allotted time?
No.
No? Have you had any evidence of people being hit?
No.
And obviously you have heard about the relatively arbitrary disciplinary system of strikes.
Yeah.
So for each of you, you would regard, and we have heard as a committee evidence of each of those from across Sports Direct, but you're saying to this committee, as a provider in each of your cases of over 1,000 people a week, that to the best of your knowledge, no one has been mistreated by Sports Direct?
Yeah, to the best of my knowledge.
Thank you.
Yes, to the best of my knowledge. How did they come to that conclusion? Well, Labour MP Peter Kyle, before putting forward his concerns about what he's been hearing, he asks if they ever communicate with their workforce, and then our softly spoken Amanda Milling gets very, very cross.
So how do you communicate with all of your staff, your agency staff? Do you survey them? Do you all of them?
Yeah, so the way the site is structured is we have an account manager, we then have team leaders, and then below that we have the coordinators.
And what's the return rate, response rate? How many of your staff do you get active feedback from?
Yep, so the way that it's structured is that for every 60 to 80 staff, they have one coordinator. So we expect those to speak to those staff at least once per week with any sort of contact.
And do that? I mean, the question was, how many do you get active feedback from of your staff? Not how many have the opportunity to speak to someone. How many of your staff actively, your agency staff, feedback, and you get active information back from them about conditions, about satisfaction at work, health and safety, welfare?
So the only way we can monitor that is when we actively do surveys, we get responses back.
And how often do you do that?
So we did one previously. I would say that we actively surveys.
When was the last one?
So that we did. When was the one with the national wage?
I did that about 3 months ago.
And what was the return response rate?
I got 45 responses out of 2,000.
45 responses out of 2,000.
So
okay.
That doesn't indicate.
Okay, all right.
I think that indicates that it's got twofold, hasn't it? That so there's
Well, it could indicate that people are too scared to actually respond because they feel there'll be consequences.
I'm not quite sure that's the case.
So let's not assume we know why people aren't responding, because there could be a variety. Now, I mean, I've been quite concerned about some of the lack of detail about employment law that you're aware of, considering just how many people you employ and you put into the workplace. But on the other extreme, I've been really concerned listening to you about the lack of high-level moral engagement and awareness of what's happening in the workplaces that you are putting staff into. In response to what's been come out in the media, you set up a committee which has the good and the great and involvement from the church in it. But what's extraordinary to me is that you need a priest to tell you that some of the things that are going on and being reported in the press are wrong.
Well, not at all. So what we're trying to get across here is that we go to the site, we've got our teams on the site, so we can only listen to these media reports and act upon them. So when we go and do these investigations, when we work with our teams and we're not finding the things that the press are bringing to the table, we then go and do whatever else we can.
You're doing it yourself.
Preventative.
What training have you had? What training have you had to go into a workplace and to look, to listen, to understand the culture of a workplace, and also to make sure that people are telling you the truth, and not as somebody who is responsible for a lot of people being placed into work and people's welfare, what they feel you want to hear?
So not me as an individual, we as a group, so the other agency, ourselves, and Sports Direct.
You mentioned fast growth as being one of the reasons why employment practices have decreased or that issues have arisen. That's extraordinary to me, because when we're talking about the way one human being treats another, and we have heard, as Richard said, some pretty appalling abuses in relationships, what you've described and put down to fast growth is inhuman to me. Yeah. That just because you're in an environment which is fast changing and fast growing and has a pace to it, that would somehow be responsible for moral degradation in the workplace. The first company I ever worked for was the Body Shop as an 18-year-old. I was an invoice clerk. That was a company that doubled in size every 18 months. I was treated like a prince. What you're describing is something that is inhuman, and you put it down to fast growth.
That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying to you is some of the problems that arise are down to the volume of traffic, such as clocking out machines. That's down to the fact that they've gone from X amount of 100 coming out those doors to a large amount coming out those doors. So I'm not saying that it's...
No. Okay. Amanda, you want to respond very quickly and then Michelle?
I want to get a bit of clarity. Earlier in the session, you said that you'd said that you surveyed your agency staff last week.
Yeah.
Come ahead of coming here. Then, in answer to Peter, you just said you had to actually discuss it. Yeah. And kind of go, when did we realise? Oh, it's about 3 months ago.
Apologies. So
can we have a bit of clarity here?
So we did a full survey of all the current workers a few months ago, which was a Survey Monkey, which is an electronic process. So you would email every single worker and ask for a response to, whatever questions we wanted to get answers to. And then
stop you there. And that you got 45 responses.
I got 45 responses to that. Yeah. So I'm openly, and in that basis, I'm saying to those workers that all the workers on site, we want feedback from you. We want to understand if you've got any concerns, any issues. And it was a very, it was a nicely proposed email, and there was actually a reward for filling it out. I think, I gave 100 there was a straw pick of someone who filled it out, and there was an incentive there to actually give us that feedback, so I can't see how that would be derived.
Can I just, very quick, but the Survey Monkey last week...
So the one last week was a face-to-face. So
how many people responded to it?
So we had 348 responses, and we got 96% positive, so both...
Don't get on the wrong side of Amanda, I'll tell you. She'll tear you limb from limb. But anyway, the final word goes to Michelle Thompson, where she carried on with these surveys. And are they anonymous?
Okay, thank you. Michelle?
Yes, so just to finish off on that, I think when you were speaking earlier, Chris, you suggested these surveys were ongoing. So would you be able to provide a specific example, say, from a year ago with the tangible responses?
So I think we do them ad hocly rather than a structured thing, and that's something we should probably move forward to, more of a structured survey process.
So would you be able to provide us with any evidence? So, for example, the one that's been talked about last week, would you be able to give us a copy of that?
Yeah.
Are they anonymous? Do people get to answer questions anonymously, or can they be tracked to the person?
The one last week was anonymous. So all it was face-to-face. It was a one-question.
It was an anonymous face-to-face.
But the individual wouldn't remember the answers.
So I don't understand that. How do we understand
it was anonymous in the fact the results that were presented weren't by individual. So they were giving an answer to someone. However, when you're surveying hundreds of people, you're not going to remember exactly what each individual said.
So they're not anonymous. So they can still be tracked.
Well, we wouldn't be able to tell you who answered which question.
Somebody
the results were anonymous.
Authority. And just to pick up with yourself, Andy, if I could, about can you provide some evidence of people signing up to their understanding of insurance, say from a year ago, for example? That would be quite helpful. And finally, why is it they need insurance when it's the employer's responsibility to provide that? I get what you're saying about travel insurance from work, but when they're there, why do they need double insurance?
It's not double insurance. If they have an accident, it doesn't affect any other insurance that may be in place. They receive a cash sum. For example, since we've operated, we've had 3 people who were killed in the workplace. Across all of the companies that we supply, and the family of the deceased in each case benefited by £125,000, which was the payout for the insurance.
And so when they sign up to that, presumably then they'll get a policy document that sets out the benefits, and it would be useful, thank you, if you could give us a copy of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your evidence. It's been incredibly informative, extraordinarily illuminating. Thank you very much.
Very illuminating, eh? Now, these surveys come up in the next meeting, as well as other stuff, but it's been a bit of a bumpy ride, hasn't it? Do I think these people are horrible people? No, I don't, but I'm someone who tries to see the good in everyone, and it's probably a curse for me, and I probably shouldn't do. But I think when you're caught up in the running dog of capitalism, you can lose that empathy, I wonder. But anyway, now we're going to see the final meeting of Sports Direct owner Mike Ashley, and again, he brings someone who possibly wasn't invited.
Mr. Ashley, welcome. That looks suspiciously like a Newcastle United tie to me. I'd like to thank you for attending this morning. It's been a somewhat lengthier process than I anticipated when I invited you to attend the committee, and the stakes have been raised perhaps more than both of us would have liked. But I do hope that we can share a constructive, balanced and collaborative approach. I think it's fair to say we know who you are, Mr. Ashley, but for the purposes of the record, could you at this stage perhaps give your name and your role within the company, and also introduce briefly your companion with you today?
Mike Ashley, Sports Direct major shareholder.
And I don't know if you want to introduce Mr. Bishop.
Yeah, I'm Keith Bishop. I'm one of Mike's advisors on PR. I'm very grateful about being here today, and I'm really grateful to hear that the hearing will be fair.
Thank you. Let's move on quickly.
Sure, I've seen that tie before. That tie looks incredibly familiar. Where have I seen that tie before? I'm sure it'll come to me. But anyway, after the pleasantries, the chair, Iain Wright, mentioned that Sports Direct was undertaking a review of working practices. And this is the boy wonder's odd reply.
Work in progress.
When will it be completed?
Never.
It will never be completed?
Never be completed.
So how can you improve working practices if the review won't be completed?
Because it's an ongoing process.
So what are your preliminary findings 6 months into it?
Sorry,
what are your preliminary findings 6 months into it?
Preliminary findings, I've explained it's an ongoing process, so I have discovered some issues, and hopefully I've addressed some of those issues.
Sorry to butt in, but I'm just trying to work out whether Mike Ashley was showing a lack of interest or whether he was feeling shameful when he said it was a work in progress. What do you guys think? But the chair then asked why he felt that a review was necessary. And Mike Ashley replied that he was concerned about the publicity that Sports Direct was getting, and then talked about a blockage at the exit gate, if I can understand. But then the chair, Iain Wright, asked Mike Ashley an interesting question.
And on that point, Mr. Ashley, I was going to question you with regards to that. Are you the right person to do it? You're the founder of the company. You've grown this company into a successful organisation. You wouldn't be impartial when it comes to this. Do you need somebody independent to look at this with a fresh pair of eyes?
I can agree with you that in some ways I'm not the right person, because I'm not an expert in every area of employment. Obviously, it's not my field of expertise. It's not what I do for a living. So, yes, there could be other people that you could have said could have been better qualified than me to do it. But I felt in the short term I would be the person to be able to make the most difference. That's why I offered to do it.
Thank you. Who did you speak to as part of this review?
As in terms of non-execs, or as in terms of workforce, or as in terms of whoever?
In terms of everybody. What was the nature, what conversations have you had when it came to the review?
Oh, what conversations? It would take me more than this whole thing to talk about how many conversations. You mean do I talk to pickers? Do I talk to forklift drivers, lorry drivers? I would say I touch most parts of that business in Sharper. Of the people at Sharper.
Did you speak to the trade unions?
No, actually, that's not true. I spoke to the trade unions last September at the AGM.
But this was the review was initiated in December.
Correct.
Are you planning to speak to the trade unions?
Am I planning to? Hopefully at this year's AGM again. Yes, no problem. It's an open thing. They can come.
Is that the only time that you speak to trade unions?
Me personally, yes.
Something stirring within me is telling me that he's not a fan of unions. It also adds credibility to what Stephen Turner said when he said they've had no direct dialogue with Sports Direct, doesn't it? When asked who he had talked about this, he might as well have just said, well, I talked to a guy in the park, and then I had a chat with the landlady down my local, and I met a geezer down the Chippy Friday night and I spoke to him about it. He just seemed to give that throwaway reply, didn't he? But then when asked if he thinks there's a time frame for when things will improve, his reply is, I do not think there is ever going to be a time span whereby you stop trying to improve things. You kind of get the air of a man who's got no fucks to give, really, doesn't he? When the chair asked him what evidence he had heard that had shocked him, he wittered on about the bottleneck, and he never shuts up about it in this meeting, obviously.
Could I also ask, in terms of the allegations that were made in December about searches, when you're talking about bottlenecks, do you accept that the company was effectively paying workers below the minimum wage?
On that specific point, for that specific bit of time, yes.
And you've now addressed that?
I hope so, yeah. I can never. I'm not there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I can only, what's the word, encourage and say we cannot have a system where we have 10 times more people than was ever envisaged for Unit A. I can understand in Unit A where the bottleneck could occur. But now we've opened Unit C and D, and it's on 2 levels now, and a footbridge, and their own car park. There should be no reason that you would get bottlenecks now at security. Now, I can guarantee you there will be the odd occasion it will occur, because something will happen. I have no idea what it is. It could be a thunderstorm or something, and for whatever reason, there's a bottleneck. I don't know why a thunderstorm would cause a bottleneck. I'm just trying to give you a silly example of something. But the process is now in place, so that genuinely shouldn't happen, because they have the capacity now to literally, it's 10 times the size. So, you know, unless we grow by 10 times again, we shouldn't ever experience the same bottleneck problems.
When people are searched
yes.
at the end of their working shift,
yes.
are they now paid for that?
Are they now paid for that?
If I clock off at 5 o'clock,
yeah,
and it takes 5-10 minutes, whatever, would I be paid for those extra 10 minutes?
No, but you shouldn't take 5-10 minutes. That's the point. Literally, it should be a constant flow. You should be literally finishing your shift and plus minus be able to walk through. That's the thing that I've tried to put in place. Literally, it should be able to help hundreds of people literally go through per minute. Literally. That's the idea of the flow. That's what we've created. That's how it was originally, actually, 10 years ago. So it should be back to that same flow.
So yes, in the world of Sports Direct, as soon as a thunderstorm turns up, everything goes to pot. Well, then it was the turn of Michelle Thompson, and she wanted to talk about the culture at Sports Direct, and Mike Ashley said it's a hard-working culture, and the value of Sports Direct is the people and the culture itself. One day it was a tiny little inflatable and now you're in control. The next day you're in an oil tanker and you cannot be all over that oil tanker. Now Michelle Thompson asked him about specific feedback and he waffled on about, I've absolutely no idea. But anyway, Michelle Thompson talked in the last meeting about a recent survey where Transline got 45 responses out of 3,000, was it? And I kind of understand where Mike Ashley's coming from about surveys.
Flag this up. So they should really only flag to me where there's red flags, where there's problems.
Would it surprise you to know then, in our earlier session, in terms of hearing tangible evidence, that Transline in particular were unable to articulate a clear, specific, ongoing, regular process for gathering staff feedback, and that they referenced a recent survey for which they got 45 responses out of circa 3,000 people. Would that surprise you to know that?
You would be amazed when you ask people to do surveys how they don't participate in them. Mm-hmm. Because what you would think is, if you give people the opportunity to have feedback, they would love to have lots of feedback. In actual fact, they don't. They actually think it's nothing to do with them. and they don't bother to put the feedback in. So to try and get that correct base to make those differences and those changes, I find the best way is go and talk to the people myself. Then if you do it with your own eyes and you're in there and you're talking to them and you ask them what sheep they're doing and how long it is and have they had any problems and have they got any no's, and they then, it's easier to get, you will get more from that than you will trying to puzzle out a questionnaire where people are actually, for whatever reason, people don't naturally fill them in. They just don't. It would be easier if everybody did. Then you would turn around and say to me, make it compulsory. They have to fill them in. Okay, I could actually see some value in making the surveys compulsory. And people would say, oh no, you can't make them compulsory. It's a little bit of a rock and a hard place and you can't win. If you sit here today and say we should have compulsory surveys at Sports Direct in Sharbrook, out of Sharbrook, wherever, I'll say, okay then, let's try that.
And would you be interested in engaging with Unite to see the feedback that they've gathered?
Engaging with Unite, so let me explain what my thing is on Unite. I believe the people at Sports Direct, I can do a better job for them than Unite. Sports Direct can do a better job for the employees at Sports Direct than Unite.
And is that a view shared by the employees, in your opinion?
I would hope so, yeah. And when I'm talking about the employees, I'm talking about Sports Direct the whole. So I'm not just talking about Sharbrook. I'm talking about the whole of Sports Direct. So I'm actually very proud of the not just the money that Sports Direct's paid to the people at Sports Direct, but how they actually produced that result themselves. Those amazing results at Sports Direct don't come from Mike Ashley, they come from the people at Sports Direct. And they are pretty amazing results. They managed to get themselves somehow to number one, and they managed to reward themselves. Well, fantastic. I'm not going to stand in their way and stop that. If that answers your question.
Mr. Ashley, you've cast doubt about the worth of staff's surveys, and I think you've cast doubt about the worth of staff surveys, and I think there's some merit in what you say. When you are on your travels and you're in the shops and you're in Shirebrook and you're speaking on a one-to-one basis with the staff, what are they telling you?
Normally, they want to just improve the system. Normally, they actually criticise what we're doing. Normally, if you, for example, stop a picker, they will tell you there wasn't enough stock in that aisle, they can't get their sheet out quick enough, there's delays, there's problems, maybe we should do it like this. And I don't just always stop and talk to a person. I could stop and talk to 5 people, 12 people. It is, as I say, an ongoing process. Most of the people at Sports Direct want Sports Direct to do better. They're actually very proud of what they do.
And how honest do you think they are? Would they say to you, Mr. Ashley, I'm not allowed breaks to go to the toilet properly? So I just want to get a flavour. Are they able to say to you, look, this is how it really is in your company?
Okay, so I can understand that. It's that sort of, that nobody would ever tell you the truth, Mike. You're the guy who actually doesn't know what's going on. And I can understand there could be a lot of reality in that. I can understand that. It's, I don't know. It's a difficult one, that.
When it comes to these surveys, I totally get what he means. Whenever I did a work survey or a course survey, I just put whatever because I was more interested in getting home to see my family. So I totally understand that, but my thoughts were, they're not going to make my life better, are they? But Chris White came up with an idea. Maybe moving the clocking in station after the security check. And Mike Ashley made a joke about not having a pen and paper. Then Chris White and the chair and Mike Ashley had a chat about lateness.
Finding staff for late clocking on. Do not award overtime for late clocking off. Relying on 0 hours contracts, banning workers from wearing over 800 clothing brands at work. Now, these sort of things, have you addressed those in a similar fashion?
Can you start at the top of the list and I'll run down?
Fantastic. Find staff for late clocking on.
Okay, so what we had there was if you were a minute late, you've got docked 15 minutes pay. You ask me what I think it's unacceptable. You ask me what I think it's unacceptable. If I thought it was acceptable, I wouldn't change it. So you say, well, OK, we didn't have to wait for not being rude or an independent... Some of the stuff we should be able to get through ourselves on the first part.
Mr. Ashby, sorry to interrupt, that's really important and we welcome what you've said. So have you changed that practice now?
Yes, as I understand it, we have. You understand, I don't physically do it. It's a bit like the minute. I'm now terrified we haven't done it, yeah? Because I will sit in a meeting and I'll say, well, OK, as I say, give me the red flags. OK, well, that doesn't sound fair, that doesn't sound reasonable. And by the way, it's not always in... I'm not Father Christmas. I'm not sitting there, I'm going to make the world wonderful. You just have to try and get a balanced view and say, as an individual, would you tolerate that? Is that fair? And if I honestly believe it isn't, I change it.
Could I ask, I'm sorry to interrupt, could I just ask in terms of that, the docking of 15 minutes pay if you're a minute late, who set that up in the first place?
I honestly don't know is the truth. I don't know when that started. It definitely wasn't a policy that I put in because I actually don't believe it's fair. If you're asking me, I don't believe it's fair.
Thank you.
I mean, if one of my kids went to work somewhere and they were 2 minutes late, they got fined 15 minutes pay, I wouldn't be very impressed by that. I think that's unreasonable.
But then Chris Wright brought up women being promised permanent contracts for sexual favours as well as the health and safety record and, more importantly, the 110 ambulances that were dispatched at Shirebrook.
However, to change the tone, we've had evidence saying from a woman that she was promised a permanent contract as opposed to an agency contract in return for sexual favours. Are you aware of?
100% unaware of that. Sorry, I'm 100% unaware of that. Sorry.
Two more questions.
Yes.
For you. One is regarding your health and safety record.
Yeah.
A total of 110 ambulances were dispatched to Shirebrook between the 1st of January 2013 and 19th of April 2016.
Yeah.
Do you think that is excessive?
Absolutely, yes.
And what systems are you putting in place to address?
So that is, again, all part of the review. And what I say is, OK, let's assume that all of those were absolutely needed. Every single call-out was needed. Well, why have we got so many call-outs? How are people getting injured in Sports Direct? It's a simple warehouse that takes in goods, puts them on the shelf, takes them out, puts them in a cage, they go on a lorry. It's a very simple process. You can't have that number of serious instances. It is impossible. So then it leads me to believe, if it isn't that, why are we doing so many calls? And I am told they were, how can I put it, over quick to pick up the phone to call the ambulance service. So what actually happened was, my understanding of the process was that if there was somebody would get on their radio, they would phone to security to say, for example, if you're not feeling well, if you get up, if you get all sweaty a bit like I am now and you're feeling a bit and you say to your line manager, I'm just not feeling, I'm feeling under the weather, they could have well have called an ambulance. They didn't actually take the person. The first thing to do was to say, I've got an incident, went to security called the ambulance. No, that's probably not the sensible thing to do. Why don't you sit the person down, give them a glass of water, see how they are, make sure because after 5 minutes they can be fine. If they've got pains in their chest, if they've got pains in their arm, if you say, OK, please, we should have a process that doesn't mean we just take this the right way, willy-nilly call the ambulance service.
Well, Mr. Ashby, I would suggest that someone giving birth in a toilet in the warehouse wasn't being over hasty for an ambulance.
No.
Now, for me, I got the feeling he just seemed to think it was a bit of a trivial matter. People don't ring ambulances on numerous occasions because people say they're feeling under the weather, do they? And I also got the feeling that having to ring for an ambulance because a woman gave birth in one of your work toilets for him was something to joke about. Now, I could be wrong about that, but that's the feeling I was getting. Well, the chair brought up the 6 strikes and you're out policy.
Yeah, the 6 strikes and you're out policy.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
If it is executed correctly, yeah, if there's not abuse of it, if it's actually reasonable, the 6 strikes, then it's okay. You have to have some kind of system. Let's call it 26 strikes and you're out. Is that right? Yeah, if it is executed correctly. So it's not maybe the 6 strikes themselves. It's again getting the group of people together saying, would you want your son and daughter under that regime? Simple. If the answer's no, what you've put in is wrong. You need to change it. You need to be reasonable. You need to be fair.
And will you change it as part of the review? Are you looking at that? Will you change things?
That's why I say the whole thing is a never-ending process of review. Now you're going to come down and say, hang on a minute, Wright, you've just committed to us, you're doing 20 things all at once. And that's what I don't want to do here today. That's why I'm happy for you to come, and I'm happy for you to have an independent, whatever you call it, timescales, things, measures, this, and yeah, you guys will make a difference. Don't worry about it.
But can I just press you on that? When you say that it's an ongoing review, you sound like a government minister, actually. You should.
Oh my God.
that was probably a criticism, so I apologise. But in terms of the 6 strikes and you have the review, could you pledge a timescale as to whether that you will look at that, whether you think that it's appropriate, whether it's enforced correctly, and that you will make changes according to your findings? Could you give the committee that?
If we just pick on that thing and I don't commit to doing too many things all at once, I would say a reasonable period for that is 90 days. You're asking me, that's not my field of expertise. And if it's not going to be longer than 90 days, or it needs to be 180 days, or whatever it is, my initial, off the top of my head, all the advice that I'm told not to do in these meetings, do not commit to things, do not, short answers, no, I'm here to talk and I'm going to. If 90 days is inappropriate, then I will write to you saying, actually, it's more appropriate 180 or it's 360, and these are the simple 10 reasons why, or 3 or 4 or whatever it is. You people are pushing against an open door. You are not pushing against a closed door with me. Let me make that clear.
Thank you.
90 days then.
Thank you.
Or I'll write to you to say it's different.
That's very helpful.
Okay.
Well, after Amanda Holloway talked about those on contracts and those who were agency workers, well then, she and Peter Kyle hit him with a bit of a curveball, and this is where things start to go downhill rather rapidly.
We've had some evidence. I've just been looking through some notes, and there's actually a quote that we had, which is somebody was actually told in one of the retail outlets that you come across as quite selfish, as you always want to leave on time. Now, I'm imagining that's going to come as a shock to you that you hear that. How does that make you feel?
That somebody said that to somebody.
So one of your management said that to somebody who was working in one of your stores.
Are we absolutely certain that's the case?
I believe we actually had written. Sorry, yes,
okay.
please come in, please.
Yeah. It was written, and we've seen the written evidence. It was in somebody's evaluation. So it was.
Oh, okay. So that's definitely happened. Okay, fair enough.
The exact quote is, "You come across as quite selfish, as you always want to leave on time." You've read it.
Well, that's not correct, is it? It's clearly wrong. I mean, what do you want me to say? It's clearly wrong. It's a bit like I can't control everything all the time. I agree with you. It's wrong.
Very interesting there. Now, Amanda Solloway asked about things like how to improve poor performance. Mike Ashley spoke quite candidly about how everyone goes through dips and low points, and even spoke about periods where he hadn't been on his game himself. And the chair brought up the subject of giving agency staff permanent contracts, and he waffled on about how agencies are experts in people, apparently. And then the chair goes further on this, but we'll get to that later because it's an absolute belter. But anyway, Peter Kyle asks Mike Ashley a straightforward question, and his reaction is very, very odd to say the least. And why would his PR man want to answer this question? Also, remember the early meeting when Chris Birkby said about problems were due to the fast growth of the company? Peter ties it all up beautifully.
Mike, thank you for coming to appear here. It really has been brilliant to have you here, and it's been great to engage with you, because we get a sense of who you are and how you approach the work, and we appreciate that, and I certainly do. Getting a sense of your demeanour here today, would you describe yourself as a kind person?
I think I can answer that, really.
No, I don't want you to answer that, thanks. This is about him. Although I should also add that, having seen how authentic you are as an individual, I don't think you need to bring a PR person with you to events like this in the future, but anyway.
Keith, if you could go. And we can halve your fees.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Kind. I would like to think I'm kind to the right people. I'd like to think I'm kind to the genuine people. And that's not some waffly stuff. No, I don't think I'm Santa Claus. Honestly, I don't. I don't think you could be a Santa Claus and honestly say, I did enough for the people on the Saturday night.
Let's not talk about what kindness means. But let's look at some of the... It is very clear that some pretty unkind practices is happening in the business that you created and you own.
Yeah.
We've already heard that somebody in their written appraisal form had you come across quite selfish, as you always want to leave on time. That's not a kind thing to do to an employee, is it?
I agree with you.
And we had somebody else who gave evidence to us, who gave pretty damning testimony working in one of your shops, not being offered any contract, not even a 0 hours contract, for many months on end, was bullied, pushed around in the workforce, and was then summarily sacked with no explanation whatsoever. That's not kind, is it?
No, and that's not no, it's not kind. It's not acceptable.
We heard,
and that shouldn't go on. Absolutely not. So
we heard from a woman who said, and I quote, this was said to her, and I quote, "If you want to get a contract, we can talk about it over dinner." She also said, not just one manager, but several. And she said so, and then broke down in tears. That's not kind, is it?
No, that's the total opposite of kind. That's some sort of sexual predators that need to be dealt with.
But do you accept that this is happening in your business, the business you created, that is shaped in your image? This is happening in your business.
Well, it shouldn't. If it does, it 100% should not be going on. I don't know what I'm going to be able to put in place to stop it, but at least I'm going to try. You sit there and say those things to me. Honestly, they're repugnant, they're disgusting. What do you want me to say? Would you like it if you were me?
Well, the point is, it's not happening in Sainsbury's.
But how do you know
it's happening in Sports Direct?
Are you certain it's not happening in Sainsbury's? Are you absolutely sure? You can sit here and say there's no, what you would call sexual within the office harassment happening in Sainsbury's.
The difference is...
I think there probably is. The question is, have Sainsbury's got a better process to prevent it, and have they got a better process for dealing with it when it does happen than Sports Direct? And Sports Direct, therefore, has to pull its socks up. Simple as that, fellas.
So you're accepting this is happening?
You're telling me about it. It's the first time I'm hearing about it. You've got to understand, it's my first time. Please, honestly, if you say to me now, I'm not going to do your 90-day thing, I'm going to go and concentrate on this. Because now you're going back 6 months. So I'm going to write to you saying, when Peter told me some of that stuff, I found it so offensive, I really don't care about your thing being on my part. I'm going to deal with what Peter said.
And it's great you're being so candid. I mean, this is great. And it's great that you also want to take these issues very seriously. But the point that I'm trying to make is that your personality is stamped through this organisation. That clearly you are hurt and upset that the possibility this might be happening in the organisation that you take responsibility for. But it is happening, and the way that you have employed people, the management structure you have in place, the training that you have put in place for the managers, the fact that you have 200 permanent staff at Sherbrooke and 2,000 who are temporary with a high churn rate, on very low pay, many of them quite vulnerable people, some of them who've come from abroad. You know, this is a culture that is ripe for exploitation.
Yeah, we shouldn't have it. I agree with you.
So are you now committing to do a review of the way you do business?
Guys, I'm coming here today to listen, and one of the reasons I agreed to come, whether or not I think I ought to or not is a different subject, is to make a difference.
So let me put this to you then, and this is, you're somebody that's created an extraordinary company.
I think
you've created a lot of wealth. A lot of it's gone to you.
Yeah.
You've created a lot of wealth. You've done something absolutely remarkable. But do you think your company has outgrown your ability to manage it?
Probably, a long time ago.
And I realise, even though I set a tiny company up in the past, which has remained tiny, and I'm an MP that's no one ever heard of, talking to a titan of the business sector. But is it not time that your own analogy is you woke up one day and your little business was an oil tanker? Well, you know, if you've gone from a dinghy to an oil tanker, shouldn't you get someone who knows how to sail and drive an oil tanker?
Possibly. I can accept the criticism of some of the things you said to me today would actually lead me to believe that he's definitely outgrown me. Because that shocks me what you said to me today.
This is really important, Mr. Ashley. Can I push you on that? Because there have been question marks over the corporate governance of Sports Direct.
Correct.
And in terms of what we're getting today is a sense, exactly as Peter has said, this has grown exponentially.
Yeah.
You're frankly struggling to contain and control and also keep a handle on what's going on. How are you going to improve the corporate governance of Sports Direct?
Iain, I can only do my best. And my best may not be good enough, as you say. But my best, that's all you can have.
Okay, Amanda, you want to come in very briefly?
Yeah.
From everything you've heard today, would you commit to reviewing and implementing a new management structure for the organisation so that actually that load is spread and we won't be hearing these stories in 12 months' time, 18 months' time?
But why wouldn't I? Would you like to... I'm not going to do nothing when I hear stories like that, would you? As a human being sat here, do nothing? Yeah? Honestly, would you do nothing if you were me sat here?
But there's two different things here. One is about procedures and processes, but one is actually about management and reviewing the management structure of the organisation.
And who am I going to easily get to do that that's going to guarantee we get a better income? Income, that's the wrong word. What do I mean? Result. Outcome. Sorry, did somebody say something?
Right, okay.
So, they were helping me with the words, aren't you?
Now I find that evidence incredibly powerful. Also, when he said income instead of outcome, spoke volumes about his thought process for me. I also thought Peter Carl was absolutely brilliant. I also admire Mike Ashley's honesty here. He could have easily said, "No, I do not need anyone's help. I'm in full control of this one-time little inflatable that is now a massive oil tanker." Well, former Tory MP Kelly Tolhurst spoke about his leadership and his full-time and temporary workers. But the star of the show for me, Paul Blomfield, carries on with this, and let's just say he proper got under Mike Ashley's skin. Or the chair brought up the slimmer overheads line that Andy Sweeney talked about too.
I wanted to pursue the same issue a little bit further in terms of your employment model, if that's okay. I mean, you're a 24/7 business, 52 weeks a year, very successful, constant flow of work. And we heard from Transline that last year, people they placed with you work for 39 hours a week, which is kind of a standard working day. You've described these as amazing people, hard-working, generated all the wealth of the company. Why don't you give them a permanent contract?
I think because we've... Sharbrook is one site. So what we then do is we say, right, we can't possibly do this in-house ourselves, so we need to go out to agencies.
Why? Why can't you do it in-house? Hundreds of organisations do. Why can't you?
Hundreds of organisations don't do it.
Yes, we don't give people permanent contracts with respect.
No, with respect, it would be amazingly difficult, naive, impossible to have grown as we've grown in the last 10 years and take all the people on directly ourselves. I'm telling you, we couldn't have done it. So I'm being honest with you, and I'm saying we could not have done it. It would have been physically impossible. No one could predict that internet growth. It came out of nowhere.
literally nowhere, and it requires 10 times the people that retail does. So the sensible thing to do, the sensible thing to do is then to go out to professionals and say, all right, what's your expertise? You employ people. That's what your company does for a living. Well, you must be very good at it, and so must you, and so must you. OK, let's take those people and let's get those people to do it. Because you were going to say to me any minute now, but if you employed them direct, Mike, you would save money. So why wouldn't I employ them direct? Why would I pay the middleman? Because it would have been physically impossible for us to do it ourselves. They make money out of Sports Direct.
What we're trying to do is to understand the culture of your organisation and how you manage growth. Lots of organisations have grown and given employees permanent contracts. Why is it so difficult for you?
I have given a lot of people permanent contracts. You're not being fair now. Now you're not being fair. You're trying to twist what I'm saying. And that's not fair. And that's why I fear coming to things like this, because you're trying to put words in my mouth and you're trying to twist what I'm saying. I am telling you it was physically impossible over the last 10 years to have done what we've had to do at Shirebrook with that amount of people unless we went to external agencies who are professionals. What you can criticise me for, and I will take it, is things like bottlenecks that have appeared that are unacceptable, and some of the things you talk about that are unacceptable, and some of the things that Peter said, unbelievable. Okay, I can take those criticisms, I can deal with it, but I'm not playing a word game with you where you try and twist the reality. So please don't, Paul, because this has so far been positive, and now you're making it negative. Please.
Well, I was asking the question, what was special about Sports Direct that didn't enable you to grow by offering the permanent contracts that other companies would?
I've said it's the internet. I've said the internet growth was never ever envisaged 10 years ago, and it is extremely labour intensive. And I'm not being funny. If you want me to go through how labour intensive an order is from when it gets on the computer screen to a sheet being printed, and how do you get the orders together? How do you pick an order in a warehouse that size for one person? How? Think about it. It's no mechanised. How do you do it? You can't send one person out to pick your order. They would come back an hour later. You can't do it. It's impossible. So you have to accept the internet growth was a phenomenon that none of us could have allowed for. And you have to accept, or I have to accept, not you, sorry, that Sports Direct have made some mistakes. You have to accept that as well. So we have to look to the future. I've offered you guys to come. I've offered you guys to come any time you want now. I've even offered to come back in a year if you really want me to. And let's do some measures. And I won't have them all right. Impossible I can get everything right. I'm one human being. So stop it, Paul, please. Okay? Let's keep this positive and let's keep rolling forward.
Well, I'm trying to ask honest, straightforward questions. Let me ask you another one then. We talked to Transline earlier, and they shared with us that the nature of the contracts that they offered have been discussed with the company, because obviously you're giving them a big contract. And as part of that contract, people say one of the advantages of zero-hours contracts, personally I don't see it, but it's argued in their defence, that it gives flexibility. But Transline employees working with you don't have the flexibility of turning down work that they're offered. Is that reasonable?
If it's true, it's not reasonable, is it? If you want, Paul, you can answer your own question. If it's unreasonable, it shouldn't be happening.
So why did you agree that contract with Transline?
I don't look after every single thing that goes on at Sports Direct, Paul, please. Please.
Isn't this fairly fundamental in terms of...
Do you know what's far more worrying than what Peter said? That bothers me a lot more than this. Yeah, this is a process of growth, and the growth has been too big. And you will take the odd pace backwards to go 2 paces forwards. It's impossible to be perfect. So, Paul, you're trying to pick on things and make them well, obviously that is terrible, and this is this. Paul, some of that has been unavoidable, some of it's avoidable. I want to concentrate on the stuff that should be avoidable. We have to be fair and balanced, otherwise what happens is I'm going to clam up. I'm going to go back to all my advisors and everybody else who said, Don't give one word answer. Do this, do that. Don't do this. Don't discuss that. Don't broaden things. No, I'm not listening to what they say because I can't be house trained. That's what they say about me.
But you've had no media training for this.
No, I've no media training. How can you media train me? I'm going to put my foot in my mouth and I'm going to say what's in my heart. And I'm going to be honest. So, Paul, please. Positive, please.
Well, I'm trying to...
And I'm trying to be. And I'm trying to be. And we're just going to start...
Let me just ask one last question. You say you aren't aware of the nature of your contracts.
Personally, no.
Okay. But you've put the people that you employ at the very heart of your business, and you say this is the most important thing to you.
Correct.
Shouldn't you be aware of the contracts under which they're employed?
All of the contracts, everywhere, everybody,
the basic
around the world.
of your subcontractors in Translate.
We have an enormous amount, we have a big division of people to absolutely look after the relationships with the agencies. I cannot actually be responsible for every single thing that goes on at Sports Direct. I can't be, Peter. Paul, sorry. I can't be. I can't be. It costs us more because we pay the agency than if we took them on full time. Therefore, you would think all round standards would be higher, not lower. Simple economics.
But isn't this a fundamental issue? Doesn't it go to the heart of the issue that you have a duty of care to the people who have built your business?
I agree with you.
Are you not, therefore, negligent in not fulfilling it if you have no idea the terms under which they're employed?
No idea. OK, let's use the word no idea. That's not fair.
Could I?
That's not fair.
Okay, Mr. Ashton, can I just move on into? We heard from the previous panel from Andy Sweeney, who's the Chief Executive Officer of Best Connection Group. He said one of the reasons why people use agency workers, and I'm using his words directly, slimmer overheads. Is it because you save costs that you choose to do this?
Slimmer overheads for who?
Presumably for the parent business that are using those workers.
Yes, OK. So slimmer overheads and the fact that we don't have to have so many people directly doing the interviews and taking them on and taking on the books and running them through the payroll and everything else. But that's outweighed by the amount we have to pay the agency, because the agency do all that and they will be more efficient, but their amount of profit that they will put on will outweigh those savings. So if you're talking about net savings, I would say if we were physically capable of doing it, we would have saved money by doing it directly. I'm not an accountant, but I can get somebody to look at that piece of work. And if that isn't the case, I'll turn around to you in a year's time, whenever it is, and turn around and say, actually, I was wrong. It actually is a net saving, but I can't imagine that it is, because it doesn't instinctively make sense to me.
Now, do I believe Mike Ashley when he says there are no slimmer overheads for Sports Direct? Now, I don't know. I've never been a businessman and never were. I'd probably be terrible at it. But he sounded really desperate when Paul Blomfield kept asking him reasonable questions. But anyway, the final clip is from Michelle Thompson and the chair, and the topic of committing to meeting with Unite, and his replies are very, very interesting.
Yeah, just last question. Again, thank you very much for coming along today. One final commitment, if I could, I'd like to try and get from you. In preparing for this session, I was very pleased to read quite a fulsome document by Unite. I've done a lot of work. Will you commit to meeting with them, to hearing about their concerns and the data and the intel they've gathered? Not just at the AGM, genuinely sit down and listen and hear what they've got to say.
Could I suggest we do it at the AGM? And can I suggest why? Because it's an open day, and therefore the reporters, everybody's there, and I don't mind having a meeting for an hour, 2 hours with them, whatever you think is appropriate, and they can do that stuff. But what I don't want is to turn around and everybody then make the meeting, could have been caused by me, the event, not the reality of what goes on in it. I'll stay there till 5 o'clock in the morning on the day of the AGM. It's an open day, everybody's welcome, anybody can come.
When is the AGM?
That's September.
September. So that means you wait till to September. You could actually commit to do that, say, in the next month, your first initial meeting, so that they have a number of recommendations in this document that you can listen to and you can take on board in readiness for coming back after that.
The only caveat I would put, and I'm prepared to do that, is the fact that if Unite are only there to, if you like, further unite, not further the people at Sports Direct, that I think I should be able to, as Sports Direct, do a better job for. That's where that clash is going to be. There's people here that actually genuinely want to see things better for people at Sports Direct and in other companies and across the thing. I get that. If I get a clash with Unite and they try and use it as some media battleground, then I'm not interested. I'm just not.
Michelle, I just want to say, but Mr. Ashley,
sorry, I'm not.
A one-off meeting once a year is not preferable to ongoing engagement. And do you see the process?
But I think we do it in
much more
September.
meaningful and productive in terms of that, rather than just I'll meet after the AGM once a year.
Okay, but how many times do you think I ought to meet them honestly and then be able to make a difference? You can't just give me the work and it's all talk. It's all in the papers next day. Mike promised this, Mike promised that. He hasn't done this, he hasn't done that. If I, from a standing start, and I did meet them, I said hello to them last September. I went down and talked to them. I was at the front. If I then talk to them in September, and I'll be honest, I say, look, of the 100 things you want me to do, let's concentrate on these 10 to start with, and let's make a difference. Let's make a difference. But I'm telling you, they want to turn it into some media circus and showboat for Unite.
Is there a top 6 or top 10 of recommendations that you could work with them and with us to sort of say that will make a difference? Would you?
I would hope so.
Okay.
I would hope so. Why not?
There were a few questions after, but I got the feeling you've heard enough of the waffle, so just leave it there. Also, I think we've covered everything we needed to know anyway. But if you want to watch the full meeting or read the transcript, I'll leave it in the description box below for you. Also, if you want to leave now because it's all over. Now, when you've made it this far, firstly, can I just thank you from the bottom of my heart for getting this far? And can I also ask you to just press the like button? And if you want to leave a comment, please do. This massive project, it took a lot of work to create, so I would really, really appreciate that. So if you want to go now, not a problem, because time is precious, isn't it? And I've nearly taken 2 hours of your precious time already, so thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. But for those who are still here to the end, what do you think? I think the fish rots from the head down, doesn't it? And for me, someone in my mind got incredibly lucky with the growth of his business, hasn't got a clue what's going on, but admits the company has outgrown even himself. He seems to think he knows better than Unite and how to look after his staff, while not knowing what contracts they're on. Also, when reading about this meeting, a lot of people were not impressed by his behaviour. You see, the thing is, I wasn't going to do a project this big. I was just going to do a couple of clips of Mike Ashley acting like a bit of a second-hand car salesman. But my internet wasn't the best at the time, and it just kept freezing, and I kept refreshing, and it just kept starting from the beginning. So, just to save me time, I just decided, so I'll just watch from the start. And the more I watched, the more and more I knew that this was much bigger than, I know, acting like a bit of a dullard. Tell me what you think. Is he this evil vulture capitalist? No, I don't know, but what I do believe is that he lost control of this little inflatable that now turned into an uncontrollable oil tanker. But let me know down below what you guys think. And also, I just bid you farewell and take care, my friends. And also, thank you for sticking it out till the end with me, and much appreciated.